Bloodborne, one of the most beloved games held hostage by Sony. Bring Bloodborne to PC, yeah? Anyway, in today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the spear saw. Is it practical? Is it useful? Well, today's episode, I hope to have the answers for you. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Screen Tested. I am your host Tyrant, where we take things from movies, TV shows, pop culture, try to create them in the real world and test them one-to-one from the media that they come from. Now in today's episode we're going to be taking a look at some of the trick weapons from Bloodborne. Sony, bring Bloodborne to PC. It's been like 10 years at this point. Yes, we're going to be taking a look at some of the trick weapons. Now some of you might remember a little while ago on the community tab I put a poll up on which one of these trick weapons you would like to see done first. Now for any of you guys who didn't see it, check the community tab every now and then. I put up polls for new episodes, just updates for channels and stuff. It's just a good place to, check in on what's happening with the channel. Anyways, now the Beast Hunter Scythe 1. I'm not doing the Beast Hunter Scythe today. I know that you guys want me to do it, so I'm going to make a little deal with you guys. I'm going to do them all. Yes, there we go, problem solved. I'm going to do all of them. Now the first one that I'm starting with is the saw spear. Now these weapons are kind of self-explanatory for the most part. One of the most popular ones is the saw cleaver because it's both a saw and a cleaver. So the saw spear is both a saw and a... I'm so sorry, I just did Dora the Explorer to you guys. Moving on. Now these trick weapons are basically just folding weapons that have functional utility in their closed position and in their extended position. If you take something like the saw cleaver for example, it has a saw on the outside that can be used in the closed position, and then once you open it up it has a blade on the inside that can be used as a slashing cleaver. Saw cleaver. The only reason why I can think of them being folding in the first place is something like carrying them, but is that worth the trade-off of having a mechanism that can fail, that are also less effective in their closed form? There's just a lot of questions here about their functionality in both their closed and open form. So I know I put a poll up of which trick weapon I should start with. Now don't worry, I'm going to be doing all of them obviously, but a lot of you guys might be thinking because I'm starting with the saw spear it's my favorite. It's actually not. My favorite is the Beast Hunter Scythe. That thing looks incredible. I have an unhealthy obsession with the look of scythes. I think they look so cool. They're just not very practical. But yes, I will be doing all of them. I'm just starting with the saw spear. Not to worry, we will get to the others eventually. And I cannot wait to get to the Beast Hunter Scythe because I want that one to be special. I want that one to be special. There, I said it. So the saw spear build process was a little bit more complex than usual. For the most part, I try to get these episodes out weekly, so I have a very limited amount of time to actually build something. However, because I've been, wanting to do this for such a long time, I took my time with the build process for the saw spear. It took a lot longer than usually for these sorts of projects. I started out with a very large vintage saw blade that I picked up for like 30 bucks. I used the angle grinder to cut off all the studs so I could remove the wooden handle, and then use the angle grinder again to shape out the actual blade. After the handle was removed, I used the angle grinder again to cut out the rough shape of the saw spear, including the larger saw teeth that would be required. Then I used my grinder to clean up some of the edges. Then I used the grinder to sharpen up all of the little saw teeth and the actual cutting edge of the saw spear. After that, I used some galvanized steel pipe for the handle. To bend them into shape, I just stood on them, if I'm being completely honest. Then I used my angle grinder again to cut the pieces of tubing to shape and length. I then put some aluminum flat bar on the milling machine to actually machine some of the pivots. I also added a flat piece of aluminum to the blade to give it some more rigidity because it started out as a saw blade. While it is pretty good and it has a lot of flex, that flex can kind of be to its detriment when it was that floppy, so I needed to actually add some structural rigidity to the blade itself, and I just thought a piece of aluminum is more than enough for this purpose. After that, all of the parts were pretty much ready for assembly. I used a whole bunch of epoxy and screws, Loctite, to assemble the entire saw spear together. Then after that, it pretty much was functional, but I still wanted to make it look the part. So I spent another hour or so just putting things like paint, wrapping it in bandages, getting it ready to, really look like it's from the game. I think it turned out alright, but then let's get to some B-roll and finally into the testing. This here is the spear saw, or the saw spear, whichever way around it goes. And this thing is very fun, very beautiful, but also incredibly gnarly. I am wearing my gloves all throughout today's testing simply because with that saw blade right there with my little fingies, yeah, I don't trust it, to put it mildly. Now, the mechanism that I've created to use in today's episode is not the same as in the games. So I've created a pin locking mechanism. So in this particular orientation, it is locked by a pin, and then when I open it, I put the pin in and it's locked again. I much prefer this method simply because when you have an articulated weapon with a blade, especially like this, close to my fingers, I just want extra security. So I think what we'll do for starting off in the testing is we'll start with the saw. We'll use it in its closed position, see how it performs against some different mediums. Then we'll try the open position and hopefully come to an informed decision whether or not this thing is a good idea. And destroy it, it did. Holy, that was visceral. Holy, all right, well, on to the next one. We have a coconut now. Now these things are pretty strong for the most part, so I'm curious how the saw will perform with something like this. The coconut is too strong for this saw blade. All right, it was worth a try. I didn't expect it to get through, if I'm being completely honest with you. It was more just for curiosity. A pool noodle, a very common cutting medium, especially when it comes to something like a blade. So let's try the saw on it. I'm expecting it to honestly just pull the pool noodle out, probably. Oh, that is... I would definitely not want to take any of that. Okay, in terms of its closed ability, you're very... Look how close I have to be. Like, I could just punch them. So I don't really see the functionality of having to get this close to someone to make strikes. What's the point, if I'm being honest? However, it's still visceral. It still works. And I mean, even against something like Tony, that tears up his flesh. That tears it up. So the closed position, it works. It's functional. It's a saw. I just don't see the practicality in it. I don't understand. I mean, maybe if you had it mounted to the hip or something like that, and in a very tight spot, you needed to pull the blade, it gets caught on me. You need to pull the blade out and be able to use it to defend or something. Maybe, I guess, yeah. I mean, you could catch some blades in the saw teeth. Okay, I can see the practicality in that too. However, in terms of offensive capability, I don't know why you would choose it over just having it open. So once we have our closed position, we then have our open position. Now, our open position is gnarly. So now that we are in the open position, why don't we try and do some cuts and see how well this thing can perform. Just look at that though. This, I don't want to touch it. I mean, it did saw through, and it is a spear saw, whatever it's called. All right, last water bottle. Let's do a bit of a thrust and then a slash, and we'll see how that goes. So. That was visceral. And then a cut. Beautiful. So it can cut, it's sharp, and that thrusting capability was gnarly. So the interesting dynamics at play here is your only cutting area is from here to here, from here and to here. Everything else is ripping and tearing. On top of that, you have a weird shaped blade. Obviously it adds reach. It does feel very weird once you start to, you start swinging it around, right? You could do reverse edge cuts with it. Okay, you could do some reverse edge cuts. So you could come in forward down there, reverse edge cut, thrust, bring it back over, sweeping, straight down, thrust. I can see that there is a lot of ways, a lot of different vectors to attack with this thing. It does seem like you could move it, you could get some good versatility of it, and even if you don't cut something, you're guaranteed to do some damage because you're just gonna absolutely rip and tear with it. Obviously, so that pretty much finishes up the saw spear. And honestly, it confirms a lot of things that I originally thought about this thing. And that is, it can be a very visceral weapon. It's super visceral, especially like this. There are some interesting dynamics at play because of how the handle's shaped and how the blade is shaped. But for the most part, I don't really understand what the point of having a closed position would be. Other than for carrying purposes, I guess. However, to be honest, you can't really attack that well with it. You are super, this is how far away you are. You have this much reach, 20 centimeters, it's nothing. It could be used to defend, I guess, but for the most part, I don't know if I would take that trade-off having to have something like a mechanism or a pivot point that could be a point of failure. I just don't see the point in having a weapon where usually when you have a sword, let's say, if the sword breaks or the crossguard fails, those are points of failure if it snaps at the tang. When it comes to something like this, you have all of those issues. It could snap at the tang, the blade could break, whatever it may be, but then you have the added issue of a pivot point, something complex that's mechanical that could also go wrong. It's just one of those things where I don't know if it's worth the trade-off, if I'm being completely honest. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I genuinely hope you enjoyed. Remember to like and subscribe. We want the channel to grow. We want to become sustainable. This has been the saw cleaver. It's been the Bloodborne saw weapon, trick weapon. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Bye-bye.